and send them out.
Okay, if you'll pass them to me, I'll try to put them into form.
Okay.
I don't have that dual system that you apparently have.
Yeah, I have many. So I will go, I'll take notes. The first thing was the municipal light plan, a town meeting that passed. It passed handily. So there were no issues there. People did ask questions, but they're all the questions that we hired you for. So it was good investment. They'll quiz you on the next one. So I think I didn't have anything I wanted to cover except for that. So we're going to turn it over to you. Keith, did you have anything you want to talk about before we turn it over to these guys?
No, I think we just start working on the task here.
Okay. And I saw you guys, Jeff, you just sent an email that had a bunch of information on it. I don't know if you're going to project or you want me to project on the screen. Or
No, I can project.
Okay.
Yeah, I know you're taking notes on your side. Let's start by introducing Julie Burkhart. She's a new member of the Entry Point consulting team. And she's a consultant, but moving through the learning curve. So she'll be in the background helping Devin and I pull the strings we need to pull, but she's got a robust background and is going to be very helpful overall for our project. So she'll also she'll contribute to your notes. She'll take notes to help us keep us on track, and we'll share that with you, and that'll supplement what you're doing.
Good.
Nice to meet everyone. I'm gonna have to figure out how to change you to my name, so I'll do that. Just wanted to add, very excited to work with you all. And just so you're aware, I live in Overland Park, Kansas, which is a suburb of Kansas City.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to cover all the time zones here.
Yeah.
That naming thing is a Google thing. To us, you show up as your name, not.
Oh, good.
We have your name.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We don't have Devin over there. He's just entry.
He's Entry Point.
Oh, is that right? Oh, great. Good to
Yeah,
know.
you are showing up as Entry Point, Devin.
Yeah, but to me, I show up as you.
Oh, is that right?
Meaning me. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So before I jump into this, I just wanted, so Keith, there was I think you were the only one, maybe I'm wrong. I think you were the only one in the finance committee meeting. And there was enough resistance there. There were definite supporters there, but there was enough resistance that I don't know whether you feel like at some point we need to reach out and as we move through the process and keep that committee in the loop as we progress, or I don't know if you have any thoughts in terms of helping them understand the process and the decision making that's built in here. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, so I'm in pretty frequent contact with the chair of the finance committee. So I do think you need to loop them in at where it makes sense. But also those guys are kind of resistant to anything. So I wouldn't worry.
I kind of perceived that. Yeah.
but we definitely need to keep them, especially when you start looking at the financial decisions that need to be made. We definitely loop them in.
Okay. Very good. All right. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so let me just, the three documents I shared, I'm going to talk quickly about this one. You've got it as a resource. It's in the folder. I think we've referred to it previously. And it just covers the available media. And I think this is probably knowledge you have. It's not long, so we just summarize what's DSL, which is, I think for you, you're Verizon, not Frontier, right? You're Verizon.
That's correct.
Charter.
Coax, well, coax you would be Charter. I've got Butte County down here. We know your Charter. And then fiber we've talked about.
You also have Chico throughout that document. So.
All right, will you clean that up, Devin, and get the right one out there in the shared folder? Thank you. And then this is on the website, so you've seen this. So I don't need to go through this. It might be interesting for you to look at the 5G stuff just to have a better understanding of 5G. It's only a couple of paragraphs.
Jeff, just one comment on that. I think T-Mobile is rolling out some 5G home now, and I know some people in town. I've seen on the online forums people talking about that. So
Okay.
probably have to address that a little bit more. The pros and cons of that as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear what the experience is as people use it. So let's try and keep dialed into that. I'll be interested in that. And that, so we'll see what kind of speeds they're getting and, how that plays out for them. And then we go into satellite stuff. Starlink is the darling of satellite, which is Elon Musk's company. HughesNet is there and Viasat. And then Wi-Fi we all have in our homes. So we're used to Wi-Fi. And then some information on upload and download speeds and then transmission distance. So cable starts to degrade quickly after like 340 feet and needs to be regenerated. And fiber will go 45 miles before it starts to degrade. So anyway, this is an informational sheet. We'll include this information to some degree in the report we do, but it's not very long, 2.5 pages and basic information that should be understood. So
Could
any
you-
questions? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
could you explain a little bit how does this, have you already sent this to us? Or is this stuff that will go into your master plan? And just what is this?
So this is an explanation. So when we say media, good question, and thanks for asking it. So when we say media, it really means there's two categories. One is what is the wired media? So for most of you, that would be Charter. Charter is the wired media that comes to your home. Some have DSL, which is Verizon. And those are specific technologies. So coax is Charter and it works in a specific way and has certain advantages and certain limitations. And DSL, so DSL is roughly the phone company technology, and coax cable is the cable company media or technology. And if you go down to,
But Jeff, this is just background information that you sent us,
Yeah.
right? So David, he sent it to us like right before this meeting.
Yeah, I was really asking, has this been sent to us and for our information, or is it going to be a part of the master plan report? What is this?
It'll be both. So
Oh.
it is information we want you to understand.
Okay, but
Um,
have you sent it to us?
Yes. Devin's going to correct it because I have a reference to Chico, California in there. So
Okay.
Devin's going to correct it and get you the right version out.
Okay,
So this is background information that we go through with all of our clients. And it's sort of infrastructure 101 is what it is. It's sort of some basic information about infrastructure. This diagram is a summary of all of that text, which means this is just showing the capacity and the speed of these different media. So DSL equals phone company, cable equals Charter Spectrum for you. 5G, 5G should equal T-Mobile. We'll see what kind of speeds they actually deliver, and what those packages look like. But the bigger those circles get, the more reliable the connection will be.
okay.
And so cable is quite a bit more reliable than DSL because the bigger circle represents capacity and speed. Then you look at the circle for fiber, which takes up most of the screen. Fiber is significantly more reliable than these other media and faster because the circle is so much bigger. That's a simple way to say it. Does that make sense?
Yes, when you say you'll send it, to whom do you send it? To the whole committee?
David,
Yes.
David, it should be in your email right now.
Hmm?
You just got it in your email. You were copied on the email that I saw anyway.
Okay, all right. Okay. Let me,
By the way, we probably should have warned the committee that tonight is going to be basically a college or a school lecture. So hopefully you're prepared for that. We're going to go through a number of concepts, and it's just going to be an educational exercise. Because we want you to have these fundamental understanding of these concepts.
okay.
Welcome, Paul, just joined.
How you doing? Sorry I'm late, guys.
All right.
All right.
Oh, and it looks like Jeff just left the meeting.
He hung up and he was the one doing the talking. Oh, here.
Oh, and he's back.
Google Fiber.
Yeah.
All right. That's an example of, we'll talk about this. It's a shared, I have a shared connection, and that's why I should not have reliability issues on fiber, but it's a shared connection. And so I get impacted by my neighbors. So Devin, I was going to ask if you have shared the survey with him yet, or you're going to do that when we're done.
I have not.
Okay. All right. So we have a little survey that will come out of this discussion that we're going to ask you to respond to. And I'm going to just point to it at this right now. All right. So this survey, you see that okay?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I'll run through this and see if you have any questions, but we actually want each of you to respond to the survey, and it'll probably only take you 2 to 4 minutes, depending on how much you need to think about each of the questions. So I'm going to tell you, so it's not a test, but I'm going to show you what we're going to be asking you and then take you through this information. So the first question, which of the following would you recommend to your select board? 1, work with the incumbent operator to address existing gaps. Or 2, pursue a new fiber optic network that is owned, it should be the town, but owned by the town,
Yeah, it's all
or a
right.
public-private partnership. So do you want to work with Charter essentially? It could be T-Mobile if the service is good, or pursue. And so what we're doing here is we're going to make a recommendation to the select board out of this work. And you may come back and say, I'm not ready to answer that question. I need more information, but that's the point of the discussion. Second, how important is it that residents have access to fiber optic connectivity? Not important, somewhat important, important, very important. So to answer that question, you need to know, so fiber is the only 50-year infrastructure. None of the others are 50-year infrastructure. So, this kind of gets to what are your objectives? We may find out that T-Mobile provides a patch that's adequate today, that it provides enough speed that it satisfies the current need. Ultimately, you are going to need fiber optics, and you are going to get fiber optics because the capacity is almost infinite. And with the technologies that are coming, they're going to require fiber optics. So the question ultimately will be, this question here is, if you say very important, and that means let's just solve this problem now and get 50-year infrastructure. But you may also say, my preference is to work with a private provider and try and get a private partner to bring it in. Third one, which of the following do you support? Public ownership of digital infrastructure or private ownership of digital infrastructure? So again, our conversation today is about this kind of content, and we want you to ask questions and probe this stuff. 4, do you believe digital infrastructure, fiber optics, is now at the point that it should be treated like other utility infrastructure? Yes or no? So, we can talk about the benefits of a utility structure in terms of it's not for profit. It's so there's cost savings there. There are some liability protections with the utility. So there are some benefits, but the primary thing with the utility is that it's agreement that we need to get it to everybody. So it's important enough in society that we can't leave people out, or there's going to be other negative impacts. So that's the key thing, really, of those two questions, which are private ownership. That would be the negative. Private is they're not committed to get it to everybody. They're committed to serve those who can pay what they charge. So those are somewhat related. 5, which of the following do you support the town pursuing? A closed access model, which is single ISP, or an open access model, which is many ISPs across shared infrastructure. So this is like our roads, which we've talked about probably. So this is the model of the road where it's the road system that's publicly owned, and then private operators use the roads as long as they follow the rules. 6, whoops, I didn't mean to check that. Assuming costs are the same, do you support a shared connection, neighbors shared bandwidth versus non-shared or a dedicated connection? So the reality on that is if you get a fiber network and it's shared, it will perform at probably something like a B+ level. If you have a non-shared or a dedicated connection, it'll perform it at A, consistently as an A network. That's the way I think I would describe those. If the town moves forward with deployment of a municipally owned and operated fiber optic network, which do you prefer? So what this is asking is Municipal Light Plant is backed by the full faith and credit of the town, and Municipal Light Cooperative is dependent on the revenue. It's more like a revenue bond. So it's the revenues of the utility essentially, and not the full faith and credit of the town. So that's the way to think about that last question. Okay, so you're all going to get a copy of this. You should not feel like you have to answer. We do want you to answer it. But we want you to feel like you can circle a question, write down notes, come back to us in our next meeting and say, give me more on the pros and cons of this particular item. So, before we finish here, we do want you as a group to answer all these, but we're trying to set you up and give you the information and the tools so that you feel prepared to answer it. And does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Jeff, I had a question
Sure. Keith. Thanks,
about the last one there.
Mhm.
I didn't quite understand the differences between I heard what you said, but I didn't understand maybe the pros and cons. And I don't know if that's something that you just mentioned that we might talk about later, or is that something that we can talk about now?
Yeah. So think of the cooperative as it really comes down to whether the town is going to backstop the debt. In the Municipal Light Plant, it becomes a general obligation of the town. And we can mitigate that risk by doing a lot of work on take rate up front, meaning go out and get people to sign up before we do construction. But ultimately, it does come down to a general obligation of the town. The way, and then under a cooperative, it's revenues of the utility essentially. So it's not a general obligation of the town. The downside of the cooperative is that the financing will probably be more expensive, which means the interest rate will be higher because there's more risk to the lender. So that would be the downside. municipal light plant will be lower cost financing because it's got the town backing. It'll probably be the lowest financing you could get for any kind of thing because it's backed by the town. So light plant is general obligation of the town. Municipal light cooperative is more like a revenue bond that relies on the revenue of the fiber utility.
Yeah, and the cooperative, the people that participate in the network are the ones that basically pay for the network, right? And the same can be with the municipal light plant. It's just that ultimately there is that kind of that stopgap of the town.
Yeah, we would organize it. Dev's absolutely right. We would organize it so that the people who sign up are covering the debt. But you do have the town backstopping that debt. So if that did fail for whatever reason, the likelihood is quite low, but you still have the town backstopping it.
But
So
I just wanna, so you're asking us these questions now, but you haven't made your recommendation yet. So are you trying to get just like a background of where we are so that then you're going to recommend something? Because I feel like I need a lot more information about, a lot of things before I make this decision. So are you just trying to get the pulse right now, or what's
no, we're not asking you to answer these right now. The way I think about this, so the best class I had in college was a Western Civ class, and the teacher gave us the final exam on the first day of class. And he said, "This is the content I want you to learn." And it was fairly exhaustive, but we knew up front what we had to learn. And then we had to go out and learn it. So I would compare it to that. We're trying to help you think about the strategic questions. We're not going to ask you to answer them right now, but we're trying to help you frame them in a way that you can start thinking about the questions you need to ask us back, so that you're in a position to answer them. That makes sense?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so we're giving you this, but we're not asking you to all send in your survey now. We want to do that before we end this process, but today's effort is to frame key strategic issues, and that's what this survey is pointing to. All right. So this document, it's a little bit technical, but we're responding to these things. What we don't have in here is the municipal light plant stuff. And we'll probably pick that up. There are some other issues that you need to know about from a legal point of view that we'll probably cover them in our next meeting besides the municipal light plant. So that's not in here, but these other issues are in this document. And then we would put something like this document in the final report, something close to this text. All right. So the public utility models, really what we say in here, we're just talking about the benefits of treating this infrastructure like a utility. But again, the key issue is whether the town is at the point where you're ready to say, we need to have this available to everybody, and we need to do what we can to make it affordable so that people are connected. And a key thing here is this sentence right here. A key question is whether digital access meets the definition of a public domain concern, and whether continued reliance on private industry solutions will only delay the development of effective solutions and exacerbate inequities. So the one before it also, we've got city instead of town, so apologize for that. As the social opportunity and economic cost to connecting individuals exceeds the cost of building the infrastructure. So yeah, we're working with Brockton, for example, and Brockton's, it's one of the tougher cities in terms of crime rates, and digital divide is, it's a bigger city, and the digital divide is it's a substantial problem there. I haven't been to Westport yet. I am going to come, but my imagination about what Westport looks like is that there are people who probably can't really afford current rates and would benefit from help, but the social impacts probably don't look the same as they do in Brockton. So, the question of public utility model, none of us question whether everybody should have water into their homes. None of us question whether we should have electricity into our homes or whether we should keep our homes heated. Those are all utilities, and it's just accepted. We, as a society, we need to figure out how to deliver those things into everybody's home. But that's not the case with connectivity, with broadband. We still treat it like an amenity from a policy point of view and general perception. Even though it's shifting, we still treat it like it's a nice to have, it's a luxury item, it's an amenity, even though we now know people are really at a disadvantage from if kids doing homework, people are limited in the ability to work from home, all of those things. And so that's really what we want you to think about as a committee, is what kind of stand do you want to take at this point in time? We're not going to tell you what stand to take. We're going to try and give you information and think through the problem. So any questions or comments about the public utility issue? And so think about it in the way we think about sewer and water and electricity. Has broadband gotten to the point where we just need to get it to everybody? And if it's not affordable, we need to figure out how to make it affordable. So that's key thing.
Just make a brief comment.
Sure.
At this point, most all of Westport is on individual wells and individual septic systems. And we're just beginning the process of introducing a sewer and water system across Route 6 at the north end of town, so that we have minimal public utilities.
Yeah.
Electricity, and we do have communication, but we don't have very much in the others. So as you tailor your illustrations, why keep that in mind?
Yeah, no, that's good feedback. I think the core issue is the same, which is there are mechanisms in place to deliver that. So I would say your building code would require a septic system, and your building code will require connectivity to the well and to be connected to electricity. But I would bet that your building code does not require that people are connected to a broadband connection. So I think it's a very valid point you're making, but the fundamental issue, I think, is still there.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions on that? Okay.
The only thing I would add is you are fortunate to live in a state that has done a lot of work and a lot of research in the area of really trying to quantify and qualify the disadvantage of people that do not have good connectivity to those that do have robust connectivity. So there's a lot of data out there that is specific to Massachusetts, which is really nice. So if, again, depending where you fall out on this side, some of that information may be very, very helpful to you, and we can share a lot of it with you.
Yeah. Okay. Go down here. So this section on affordability, really, we've given you a lengthy list on tools that are available to us to make, and we think about fiber optics. So you're either going to continue to work with Charter Spectrum and accept that they're your main provider, or this T-Mobile thing is going to be amazing and that will have an impact, or you're going to build a new fiber network. You're not going to build a new coax network because it's actually less expensive to build a fiber network and much exponentially better outcomes from fiber. So, a key question is, if we build a fiber network, can we make it more affordable than cable and at the same time get all of those benefits from the speed and capacity of fiber? And we can tell you that the answer to that is yes, we can. We can build the network, and we're pretty confident we can do it, even given your geography. We think we can do it at a lower price point than you're all paying for cable. I think the main question will end up being if the political will is there to take it on. So, but this list here is ways that we can improve the affordability. So there are different tools that are available to us to positively affect the affordability. And I won't read all of them. We really want you to go through them, and then we want to follow up on this document. We want you to make notes to yourself and come back with questions. So, we've given you, what are there, almost 20 ideas in terms of improving the affordability. Some of them are more powerful than others, but all of these things can have a positive impact. And so what we're saying here is, as part of our strategy, presumably that's going to be one of the goals. We are going to ask you to say, before we finish, we're going to create a vision statement, and we're going to say, these are the objectives that we're sending up to the select board. Recommended priorities and objectives, along with a vision statement. And presumably affordability is going to be one, but we can't speak for you. Accessibility. So I think much of Westport probably has access to cable. If there are people still stuck on DSL and they don't have a cable option, DSL just doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't. People are at a real disadvantage if they're limited to DSL. So even the federal government is moving beyond DSL is acceptable. So people that are stuck on that, federal government's trying to fund infrastructure to fix that problem. So accessibility really is a question of no wired connectivity and no cable connectivity. That's really how that slices. And then, as we've said, fiber is 50 to 100-year infrastructure. All right.
Hey, Jeff, just as an FYI.
Yep.
I recently did collect all the speed test data for Westport for 2021. So January 1st through the end of December last year. And Charter, and of course, well, it's the old MCI platform, but it's basically Verizon now, shows up in the speed test. The average download speed, there's 48,728 tests. Okay, so a little shy of 50,000 speed tests. Spectrum had an average amongst all of those of 47.58 megabits download and 6.9 upload. Verizon, and this goes back to what you're talking about, DSL not really working anymore. Verizon had a 3.18 download, megabits per second download, and a 0.73 megabits upload. So you're not sending anything out. You're less than 1 meg download, upload. So that just gives you that's what we're talking about here.
Okay, good insight or feedback. All right, let me just pause. Any questions on anything we've covered so far?
No.
Okay. All right, so as we think about the possibility of, let's say, a community-owned network, that's really ultimately what we're thinking about here is this viable? Is this feasible? What would it look like? You have two choices from a general category point of view. You've got closed access and open access. You're all familiar with closed access because that's what you have today. DSL, Verizon, even T-Mobile, and Spectrum are all closed systems, which means they are the ISP. They don't let anybody else run across their wire. Those are closed systems. So the town could deploy fiber optics, and either the town could become an ISP, or you could find a local ISP to operate a single ISP system. The alternative is an open access system, and there are 3 kinds of open access. So within that broader category, there's 3. Dark fiber, what that would mean is that the town would build to the edge of everyone's property and not go onto the property. And you would allow any ISPs that wanted to do the drop, which means from the curb, from the edge of the property to inside the property. That is dark fiber open access. So essentially the town builds a network to the edge of every property in town, and it's a dark system. And then the ISP builds from the edge into the house, and it's the ISP that lights it up. And it's open in the sense that you would allow, you might establish, you got to be in business for, you have to have been in business for 2 years, and you may set some criteria, but presumably that can be an open access system. So that's dark fiber. Lit fiber manual open access is you build all the way into the home of everybody that signs up, and any changes, and then there's multiple ISPs available. When people change their ISP, that has to be done manually, which means people can request it through a website. They can say, I want to change my ISP from ABC ISP to XYZ ISP. But then they have to go in and actually do some programming to make that change, the manual open access provider. So that's how that works. You do have multiple choices, but I'm going to say it's 20-year-old technology. And then automated open access is a system where when somebody requests to switch their ISP, software does it, and it takes less than a minute. So if you wanted to go from, ISP X to ISP Y, you would just go in and unsubscribe from X and then subscribe to Y, and the software would actually cut off the connection from X and create a connection to Y, all done in software on demand. The benefit of that is that it creates real competition, which you really get competition on price when people can change dynamically. Just think about Amazon. It's a true marketplace, and companies on Amazon compete on their stars, their guest rate, or their user ratings, and on their price. And that an automated open access system is going for the same thing. So, and then we've got a disclosure on here. So Entry Point has 2 sides to our house, just full disclosure. We have our consulting business where Devin and I spend most of our time. And then we've got a technology arm that is focused on developing technologies for automated open access. So you need to know of that conflict for us. So any questions on these 3 types of open access and the distinction between a closed and an open system at this point?
Well, Jeff, I have a comments on a lot of the stuff you're saying, but I was going to wait till you did the survey. But, down here in Westport, we have, for potential providers, you have Charter, Spectrum. There's Open Cape, Steve Johnston.
Yep.
They come down Route 6.
Yep.
I guess you can look at Verizon, but no matter who it is, they're going to have to bill to you. If it's a smaller company, White Tower, whomever it may be, they're going to, the cost for the interconnect for them to get to you, one, and then there's the management piece. So I think the idea of town fiber is great. I just have a lot of questions on the logistics and the financial aspects of it. That's what we do for a living. deal with this kind of stuff. I deal with TMLP, I deal with Open Cape, and I think it's a great model. It's just a matter of will it work in Westport? And I mean, I look at like my parents who live a couple houses down from me. If I said to them, I can get you better internet, I don't know if it would make a difference to them, but let's assume it did. They're going to lose their TV bundle, and if they have a phone still, I don't even know if they have one, but I don't know if they really need it. But the point is, I think if as a group, I know that's not your job, but we need to come up with a solution for people, because if we tell them, like a dark fiber open network, let's say, and you have to pay for the build. My driveway is 300 feet long underground.
Yep.
And you're going to have the ONT and all the other good stuff that comes along with it. It's going to be somewhat pricey. Someone may say, I really want to get this product. I like the speed is phenomenal, the performance, all that kind of good stuff. But then when you tell them it's going to be $1,000 or whatever it's going to cost to install it, that's going to be somewhat of a roadblock. I think, when we do this, everybody in the committee needs to look at this as a whole solution and what it's going to cost for the end user, because the price is great on a monthly basis, but if, who's going to eat the installation costs? And Westport has a lot of long driveways.
Yeah.
That's just my point on this particular part.
Yep. So that's a key variable, is if you do have a lot of long driveways, we're going to have to figure out what's the proper way to deal with that. So all good comments. And that's the kind of, I think we're teeing up information for you. We want you to take the information, and then when we get back together, I think we want to do Q&A on this. We're not going to have enough time to fully vet it today. But that's the kind of stuff we need to sift through. And on the long driveway thing, so I had a call yesterday with Shutesbury, Mass, which is out in Western Mass. And it's only, I think the town has less than it's like 950 homes. But they had no connectivity. And we might, at some point, we may want the woman that runs that to join one of our meetings and just, you guys pepper her with questions. But she and her neighbor were so frustrated because they didn't have cell phone connectivity. They didn't have DSL. They didn't have cable. They had nothing in 2015. So these two women got together and basically went door to door and built this network. And they've got a 90% take rate. So 90% of the town participates in the Shutesbury fiber network. So that's a different thing than where you're at, because you've got coax right now.
I think along the lines with what Paul was just saying about the initial installation, right? The hookup to my house, and how do you pay for that, or how do you make that affordable? And then I'm sure you have in here somewhere the maintaining it. What happens if car crashes into the thing, and how do you maintain it? Who pays to maintain it? That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not in this document. It is one of the things we'll cover in one of our sessions. We view that as not strategic. We view that as tactical, which means it's an operational decision that needs to be made. The short answer there is the town could do it, but we could easily go to Comtract and say, Comtract, we would do it in, to maintain the network, you're going to have two partners. You're going to have one partner that runs the software that runs the network, and they would probably do the troubleshooting and the monitoring for the network. And then Comtract, or somebody like Comtract, would do the physical maintenance if you outsource it. So if fiber gets cut, they would repair it. If you got to hook up a new customer, they would do that. So we'll cover that in a separate session, but you're right. I mean, that's something you need to fully understand what the options are. And the decision there we view as a tactical decision, but it's really, should the town operate it, or should we have third-party operators? And given the size of Westport, it probably will make more sense to at least start with a third party. And at some point you may, if you own the infrastructure, at some point you may say, we'll leave that available to us, but let's start with third party operations. And that's just a lower barrier to get over to get this thing moving. But we'll cover that pretty thoroughly in a separate session. So, but you're absolutely right, Shauna. So, this is the kind of dialogue we want to generate out of this document. We're kind of framing it for you right now. And then we want to make sure you really understand, the difference between closed and open. And then if you decide, we really want more than one ISP, then you're putting yourselves in the open access space. Then we want you to understand the 3 different kinds of open access and what are the pros and cons of them. Any questions, other questions on that part of it?
Yeah, so I had Jeff.
Mhm.
So, I mean, one, owning the plant allows us options. So either, how we own it and even if we had a single ISP come in and run it, I mean, we still have the flexibility to say, all right, maybe they have it for 3 years, they don't do so well, and we can swap out to the next vendor after that, and and have a contract with the next vendor for like 3 years. So having the cable plant affords us that flexibility, correct?
It does. I mean, that's one of the key benefits of ownership is you set policy, and if something's not working, then it's within your power to address it. If you're dealing with a national company, they're really going to deliver whatever they're delivering national, and there's pros and cons to that. I mean, they're not terrible. They're not like the big national carriers are not D operators. You pay a premium and customer service is what it is. But so yes, you're hitting on a key component, which is you have the power to fix problems when they exist.
And the same would be for the operations and maintenance too. If you were contracting out and you had a vendor and they weren't meeting, customer service needs or whatever, you could swap them out with the next vendor that can do that. So again, you still have that flexibility. So even if you did choose that one company or that one vendor, you could change out if that wasn't working for you.
Yep, that's exactly right. And so, when we get back together in our next session, it's likely that we will ask you, we'll go through these sections and say, what do you understand based on the information we've provided you? What do you understand to be the advantages and disadvantages of these different things? So in the open access, we'll likely ask you, what's your current understanding, pros and cons of dark fiber open access, manual, automated? And because we want to make sure that it's not really a test, we want to make sure you understand how to make decisions around these issues, because they are key issues as you make a recommendation to the select board. Okay, we're not going to have reliability we can cover. The next section's a little too thick to go into. As far as reliability, we've got really 3 things you can do to impact reliability. One, the most important is to get fiber optics. So if it's important for people to have really reliable 50-year infrastructure, fiber optics, I think it's going to be 100-year infrastructure, but let's just say 50 just to be practical. Fiber optics is the one thing that will have the biggest impact on reliability. Second, our recommendation would be a non-shared architecture. Shared, when you have neighbors sharing, it happened to me in this call. Even though I've got fiber, I got kicked off the call. And that's because one of my neighbors was doing something that sucked up all the bandwidth. So that will have an impact, a meaningful impact on reliability. And then the third is some people still build fiber networks that are asymmetrical, and that's not necessary. You can build fiber networks really at no more cost that are symmetrical and dedicated, so everybody has their own network and it's same upload and download speed. So those are the 3 recommendations we're going to make on reliability, but we want you to be able to talk to these things as well. So we want you to come back at us with any questions. We can dive a little deeper into, there's 2 main architectures. One's called PON, passive, and it was alluded to earlier. Passive optical network, that's a shared architecture. The other is straight Ethernet. Some people call it active Ethernet. And it's with Ethernet that we can create dedicated connections for every home. And what that means is that people will consistently get 900, like 940 down and 940 up, and then it'll just always work. So we go into that in a little detail here. All right, and then the next section we're not going to get into tonight because we don't have time to get into it, but we will get into it in the next meeting. This is where it does get a little more technical. Well, all of this is a little bit technical. So homework assignment is just to read this document and make notes to yourself. And we're really kicking off these strategic things. We're trying to frame the strategic issues for you so that you know these are the strategic decisions we've got to make. And then we want to arm you with information so that you can ask questions and improve your understanding of these things. So I'm going to stop sharing. So any comments, questions? Are we clear on what we're asking for there?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you gonna send the documents out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you should have got it in your email already.
Yeah, it should be there. I
Um,
noted a couple of grammar fixes, but it's there.
so the idea is you want us to review the documentation that you sent, that we've got, and then in 2 weeks, do you want to talk about it, or do you have another topic? Like when?
No, I want to. Yeah,
start?
2 weeks. We don't want to lose momentum on it. So 2 weeks from now, that's what we want to cover: is go back into these strategic things.
So our action for in 2 weeks is to have our marked up copies so we can, ask questions and make sure we understand each of the sections.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, and we'll kick it off by covering that 50-year, that section we didn't cover yet, which is how to build a 50-year infrastructure. So we'll start with that, but then we want an active discussion on these things and make sure we're communicating clearly.
So Jeff, just if I can go back to the reliability. So when I think of reliability, I think of the redundancies and the fiber optic plants and all of that stuff. So is that going to be covered in that 50-year infrastructure, or how do you factor in reliability in a community where there's physical limitations to some of that, creating some of that reliability in that infrastructure?
Yeah, for sure. Redundancy is it's for sure a reliability issue. Probably the most important reliability component there is, can you get to Providence and can you get to Boston? So do you have two paths? And if you did Open Cape for your middle mile, you would, because Open Cape goes to Providence and they go to Boston. And the last time I talked to Steve, he said that they sort of bake that in, that like if anybody on the South Coast used Open Cape, they would give them path to Boston and path to Providence. We're not going to spend the money practically to give people redundancy at their house. So the next question would be, how's the network architected locally so that you've got kind of a ring, so that if the fiber gets cut, does it take the whole town down, or can we architect it in a way where there is resiliency within the footprint in the town? So there's a couple of legs to that stool to your question. It is the right question. It's a good question to ask. It'll ultimately,
Jeff, I gotta say, you gotta get a better connectivity here.
am I choppy?
You're very choppy. Yeah.
Okay.
John Alden had a hand raised.
John?
Hi. Just
Yeah.
curious. 3 questions. One of them may not be appropriate for this conversation, but I'll ask it and you can tell me. Have we got any sense of what we're tied into with Charter? What period of time we tied into them, or can we break that at a certain period, time frame?
So Renee might be able to answer that, and I will let you in a minute, Renee. But this is independent discussion of Charter, right? But we do need to talk about how we're communicating to Charter about this. and Renee is on the Internet Advisory Committee. I'm sorry, on the Cable Access Committee, but it's independent. We would still proceed with Charter. They might lose some customers eventually, and they probably would be concerned about that. But there's no Charter can still keep going.
Sure. There's no binding agreement with Charter as of now, and we're in the process of renegotiating the cable license for the town and presenting that information to the select board, getting all our ducks in a row. And I believe there have been some preliminary meetings with Charter, with a cable attorney that's being used. And but as of now, nothing is formal and concrete.
You're talking specifically about your franchise agreement?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. That doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about here.
That's for cable TV. The franchise agreement's for cable TV. It's not for internet.
That's correct.
What you do for internet it's exactly what Shauna said. It's independent of cable TV. So
Now, secondly, Charter can obviously be focused in town as well as the independent ISP that this town may become. Now, Charter does seem to have decent service, and when something goes down, you generally get it fixed pretty quick. I'm only concerned about the independent contractor whose only interest is to get a call, schedule a service call, and come out and fix your fiber cable if the town becomes a fiber optics provider. In your experience, are there contractors out there who are responsive that will handle something within an hour or two and get them back online, or is that too much to ask for?
yeah, no, I think you can solve that problem. We would build SLAs into it where there's penalties for not getting a backup, and it'll be tiered. So the short answer is yes, you can solve that problem.
That'd be a huge concern for me in particular, because I'm on 24 hours a day, and we rely on it for a lot of the businesses that we're involved with, and we couldn't afford to be down at all, to be honest with you.
Yep.
And so my concern by switching over to a brand new network, it may make sense to me in particular to stay with Charter.
Mhm.
And if I can feel comfortable with a long-term service agreement, where people are locally or they're coming out and they're fixing these things on time, that will make a difference to me. So those are two questions I had. I think I got enough information from both that can help me make a decision. Thank you.
Great.
Yep. Thanks. Okay, Shauna, I'm going to push it back to you. That's what we wanted to cover today.
Okay. I know that did make me think. Irene Buck, who chairs the Cable Advisory Committee, did reach out to me to meet. So I'll contact her and get with her, because I think, Renee, is the intention you guys are going to talk about it on your May 11 meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So May 11, the Cable Advisory Committee. Keith, do you have any update on what's going on with the Comtrack? Is that the name of it?
Comtrack.
Yeah, I received an email from them. Initially, they said that the fiber was going to be shipped by a particular date, and then he immediately followed up and said, no, they're actually starting the production build of the fiber tomorrow. So we've got a confirmed date that they're building the fiber or making the fiber tomorrow, and then as soon as they're done making it, they'll ship it out. So it could be another 3-4 weeks before that that arrives here, but at least we've got that committed date there for the build.
So we're getting closer, but it's
We're
not
getting closer, yes, but I wish I had better news. I was happy with the first email saying that was going to be delivered, but it was short-lived.
All right. Our next meeting is going to be May 19. So everybody just do your homework for May 19. Did anybody else have anything else that they wanted to bring up to the group?
Shauna, let me just raise, am I online? I guess I am.
Yeah.
I think this is very complicated stuff. And I would like to suggest that we might select a subcommittee of two of our most knowledgeable people, Paul Junkas and Keith Novo, to go through this and evaluate the pros and cons and and come up with their recommendations as to what they think are the best choices. I mean, we've been presented with a whole lot of stuff tonight and on which choices need to be made. And I don't feel at all qualified to make intelligent choices. And so I'm just wondering whether we couldn't ask the two, maybe Renee also fits into that, I'm not sure, but the 2 or 3 of them to carry on discussions with
So David,
Jeff and others. to see-
the way I'm thinking about it is that we all go off, review the material, figure out the questions we have. I feel like Paul and Renee are going to have really good questions when we come back. So I feel like that conversation is what we'll have on the 19th.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll listen to them then. Okay.
We know it's a new language, David, and we get it. So, but
It
you
isn't
know,
just language. It's all that goes behind the language.
yeah,
And you're posing some very significant choices. And I think you've put a lot of stuff in there that is just a possible option. But I guess I'd also like to know what I have a pretty good sense of what your recommendations are, but I'm not 100% sure. And so I'm willing to turn to the experts on this. And I think Paul and Keith are 2 experts, and Renee in some spheres, and you guys are. So I'd like to defer to experts to save my brain. And so that's all I'm suggesting. Maybe we can do it at our next meeting. But
We
I would
can-
encourage the experts on our side to look at it carefully and to be prepared to make their recommendations at the next meeting, having evaluated this as to what their thinking is. And then the rest of us can kind of decide whether to follow along or not.
Well, Jeff, can you just give us an outline of like, is next meeting when we're making this decision, or is next meeting where we're getting more information? Like, what do you see the next
Yeah.
few steps in this process are? Because I don't feel like that we're on the verge of a recommendation yet.
no, we're trying to tee these issues up. You know, we want to get this project done let's just say we want to get it done in a 3 to 4 month time frame. These issues are core to where we're going to go from here, but you really don't have to finalize that. So Brockton is nearly done, and we're now trying to get them to finish this survey. I mean, they have the report. We're trying to now get them to finalize their recommendations. So no, we're not going to make decisions in the next meeting. This is just a deliberation and education process.
But what are some of the other things that we'll cover in the next few meetings? I think you talked about tactical versus strategic.
Yeah. So on the tactical side, I mean, that issue of driveways, I mean, that's kind of a design thing. It would be good to get data. The reason to do a high level design is then you know how long your driveways are, and you know that's kind of an operational. Well, no, it's an infrastructure question. What I will do, Shauna, to answer your question is we'll send you a timeline, assuming that we're going to meet every other week. Before the next meeting, we'll send you a timeline for the duration of the project that'll have the answers to that question.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I think that might put a okay, when we don't know everything now, we're going to know more 2 weeks from now, and then when do we need to be able to okay, now we know enough that we're going to tell the town this is what we recommend.
Yep. So Julie and I will work on that timeline, and we'll try and get it out to you next week.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, I mean,
Anything else? Go ahead,
Keith.
Keith.
to David's question there. I mean, I think I have a pretty good understanding of what what's been conveyed to us, and I already have a pretty good idea of what I would recommend. And I'm sure Paul understands and Renee understands what's being said, and probably have recommendations as well. But I think it's important that the entire committee understands this. I think that was the reason for the committee, is so that way we get the collective knowledge and the collective nod of the heads that this is what we want to do. So, I mean, I certainly have an opinion, and I would expect everyone else does. I'd like to, potentially keep keep moving forward like we are, so that way we can all come to that same agreement at the end.
Okay,
You can give Keith your proxy vote, David.
yeah. Well, I'll talk to him. Okay. Thank you.
All right,
Anything
Shauna,
else from
anything else
anybody?
for today?
No, I think, all right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Motion to.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. You guys have a good
Thank
evening. We'll
you.
see you on the 19th.